So our next speaker is representing Diller Renfro, Scofidio and Renfro, Benjamin Gilmartin. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor for us to have you. You are the face, well, your company, your organization is almost a face in New York with all the buildings that you have done here. And we want to hear more about your work. Let me introduce you to the public, okay? So a partner at the Diller Scofidio and Renfro. Many of you knows him, knows the company like DS+R. Benjamin led the redesign of Alice Tully Hall, multiple public spaces within the Lincoln Center for the Performing Art Campus, and the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive at the University of California, Berkeley. Most recently, Ben completed the United States Olympic and Paralympic Museum in Colorado Springs, and highlighted as one of the most accessible museums in the world. We want to see that. And he laid the design of adjoining Park Union Bridge. In addition to the University of Sydney, Ben is also currently, and I hope this is current, co-leading the design of the MIT Schools of Architecture and Planning in Cambridge. Well, I know that you have a lot of material to share, and we want to hear from you, so the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much, Natalia. It's great to be here and to have this opportunity to speak to you at this conference. Let me see if I can get my screen up and running. Okay, so I'm Ben Gilmartin, as introduced, partner at Diller Scofidio and Renfro, and it's fantastic to be here. To begin with, set against the really broad set of crises that the conference posed as a backup, since 2020, COVID and issues of health, problems across the country that are becoming more and more manifest due to climate change, real issues in the economy globally and locally here in New York, and obviously social and political upheaval. I want to try to situate our work in a way that positions it its relevancy today as much as in the past. That I guess I'd say, how do we make the case for persistent importance of public and cultural spaces in our cities with these incredibly difficult interwoven crises going on? I would personally, I wanted to step back for just a minute and make some rather broad points that reflect my beliefs and why I'm passionate about the work that we do. Obviously, the world is moving into cities very fast. So by 2050, perhaps even 3/4 of us will be living in urban centers and cities. And so that means we who focus on cities have our work cut out for us. In relation to climate change and the environment, cities are absolutely the greatest producers of CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases. But on a per capita basis, we're actually much better than ex-urban areas, so that there's an opportunity there. If we can get people living sustainably and well in cities, and we can improve our cities, that holds some of the ingredients in addressing the climate crisis. in terms of health and longevity, the article asks, is city life killing you? But it says you're more likely to get in a traffic accident, die of a gunshot wound, or suffer from high blood pressure, obesity, or diabetes if you live in a rural area. Longevity and health outcomes are better in cities, and there's an opportunity to improve and to respond to major crises in our urban centers effectively. And so there is a role for our public and cultural spaces within cities, simply to create places where people want to be in cities, to draw people to cities, to create environments that attract people there and make them want to stay and live in cities, contribute to the opportunity to create a more sustainable, more carbon efficient global environment, and also to cooperate and live in a kind of collaborative way, addressing problems together. When we got hit with COVID in 2020, obviously New York City was one of the places that got hit earliest and hardest. Our streets and public spaces shut down, and there was a terrible shock to the entire urban environment here. The way that we lived, the way that we worked together, the way that we shared our life in public, entertained ourselves, and in every other conceivable way. That being said, when we've moved forward through the ongoing address to COVID in the city and worldwide, and we've felt at times that our living environments, our work environments, were stressed or even broken as types of places that we used to be in, and we need to fundamentally rethink them. Our public and cultural spaces, our outdoor spaces of common experience, did offer places of regrouping, regathering, experiencing social life together, having a sense of community that offered a kind of resiliency and an ability to be adaptive in very trying circumstances. So I believe that cities hold the future of our shared and interconnected lives, sustainable growth, and are an important site of our fight against climate change. Our public and cultural spaces play a role in drawing people into cities, catalyzing growth, and providing spaces of social resiliency in the face of the unforeseen. When the spaces in which we live and work and are taught and entertained have proven brittle and strained to the breaking point, even universally questioned, in some cases asked to be completely rethought, our public spaces have proven to be elastic, sticky, resilient, and to offer moments of transition into future conditions of sustainable living. So at DSR, we're 4 partners who collaborate on design and everything together with 120 staff in New York City. We're known for doing cultural buildings, museums, performing arts, and education spaces, as well as public spaces, a lot of outdoor public spaces and spaces of culture that engage and activate public space. So I'll look at 3 projects fundamentally. I'll revisit Lincoln Center as a public space and look at what drove that project, as well as how it's transitioned through the last 2 years and what that has to say about lessons we've learned about public space and its ability to help in addressing the unforeseen in cities. And then look at Highline and the Shed, which were projects that are also in New York City and are cultural and public space projects. The Shed, which in fact opened right before COVID and has persisted through. And then finally, as Natalia mentioned, I'll transition geographically to looking at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, which opened during COVID in 2020 in Colorado Springs and is a sort of urban catalyst project, which has survived and is thriving now in that area. So a quick tour of Lincoln Center and our design there was originally an acropolis of the arts in New York City, raised on a podium, a kind of megastructure complex for the arts, and over time came to be perceived as the city grew up around it as disconnected from the fabric and vibrancy of the city in which it was situated. Our work there stretched across 12 acres, had quite a bit of public space as well as expansions to the Juilliard School, the North Plaza, and a rethinking of the Columbus Avenue Grand Entrance and the Fountain Plaza there. Lincoln Center was always relatively majestic and fairly spectacular public space, and it had incredible energy and public life that we were inspired by and wanted to build upon. But it's was also a project that conscientiously turned its back on the city around it. Arriving at its front door, you would cross 11 lanes of traffic on foot, arrive at a rather meager set of monumental steps, and then have to cross 2 more lanes to arrive at Philip Johnson's plaza, Josie Robertson Plaza. And so our primary gesture was to suppress the vehicular traffic, reconnect the pedestrian plaza to the city street at Columbus Avenue with gentle terracing steps, to introduce gentle sloped or ramping ways up into the porticos to provide universal access to the plaza for everybody, to bridge over and provide a kind of inviting arrival below for cars, but separate from the public access to the street, and to produce a new kind of a digital marquee embedded into the grand stair steps that spoke of everything that was going on in the campus programmatically, invited you to be there and to join in the public life of the campus. The central fountain we floated above the plaza to provide a kind of dramatic invitation to sit and watch people go by. The fountain itself was a pretty interesting water instrument full of some surprises that would draw people as well and create sort of moments of unexpected experience. And we considered the plaza to be not just an outdoor point of entry to the venues, but also a fourth venue in its own right. We put infrastructure in the surface that supported outdoor public events all year round. This was Fashion Week on the plaza, using the fountain ring as a stage, and large dinner galas outdoors. Adjacent is North Plaza, which was designed by Dan Kiley and was a sort of windswept, very austere modern plaza in front of Sarin and Bunshaft's Lincoln Center Theater. And we rethought that by producing a new surface at the northern edge that twisted and tipped up to produce a space below and a lawn above, a new kind of environment or a new atmosphere at the North Plaza that was very comfortable, informal, and inviting to hang out on, and repositioned the reflecting pool and more sculpture, produced a new shady, comfortable bosque of trees on the western edge by the Metropolitan Opera that forms a much more intimate outdoor room. And here's the Hype Bar, grass surface, very comfortable place to hang out, to make out, or to enjoy outdoor performances during the summer. And then there's a food and beverage, the Lincoln restaurant below, which is activates the plaza and provides an attraction to bring people there. The Juilliard building, which was a kind of a bunker for teaching and learning the arts, connected to Lincoln Center. We expanded to provide additional spaces for the school, but producing a urban canopy that overhung the corner and undercut the building to create an urban living room that was a public space that transitioned from the plaza into the lobby space with an invitation to be there as well. So a comfortable place to hang out, to watch people, and a strong sense of connection between inside and outside, inviting the public in to the outer lobby of Alice Tully Hall. And then this is just a representation of our reimagining of Alice Tully Hall within. The Juilliard building, we also sheared along the Broadway line to make visible the inner life of the building to the street outside. So Lincoln Center obviously had to shut down like all the other venues on Broadway and performing arts throughout the city. As soon as it was able, it began to reprogram its public spaces outside, and the outdoors became the means of keeping the institutions going, keeping their programming alive, and keeping a sense of connection with the public, providing spaces for engagement and social life outdoors during COVID, which began with small things, outdoor performances at a small scale, these kind of outdoor installations in the plaza, not by us, but by Mimi Mann, that formed places for people to comfortably gather on the main plaza, and ultimately infrastructure for an outdoor dance ballroom, effectively, the Oasis by Clint Ramos. So the nature of the public spaces at Lincoln Center never anticipated this, the condition of COVID, nor what would be needed to transition through COVID to the moments recently when all of the venues have reopened, and now David Geffen is opening for the Philharmonic this month with a full renovation again. But the kind of the nature of the public spaces, their connectedness to the city, the infrastructure that we placed within them, enabled the potential for these spaces to become resilient and to offer a kind of public life that was desperately needed, that recreated a sense of community in the city while COVID was ravaging New York. The High Line everybody knows very well, the conversion of the elevated rail to a pedestrian park that connects the entire west side from Gansevoort Street up to the Hudson Yards. The systematic interweaving of ecology and surfaces for human inhabitation, the amazing way in which it wends its way through the city, revealing unexpected moments of experience between buildings, the way that it greens a corridor of the city to provide cooling and cleaning of the air as you walk through. It's a place that transitions beautifully through the seasons, the fall and the winter. It produces unexpected moments of pause, gathering, hangout, and social interaction, such as the 10th Avenue overlook, which has the amazing view looking up 10th Avenue and watching traffic as its primary attraction, doing nothing. The variety of experiences that it produces appeal to people at all speeds, from hanging out for long periods of time to moving quickly from north to south. And it's a place that at times can host large groups of people parties and whatnot. When COVID happened, obviously it closed as well, but it was one of the spaces of the city that was able to reopen more quickly than most uses, offices, and other things. And again, it became a place to go in the city at a much lower density than it had been before. But it produced a kind of an experience of being out in public with others, an ability to regroup, to enjoy being in the city again, and to rekindle social life and opportunities for the exchange of ideas. So in that sense, I would argue that the High Line was a space of social resiliency during COVID. The High Line connects to the Shed, which is another one of our projects. So the two together form a kind of ensemble at Hudson Yards. Shed's a 200,000 square foot infrastructural space for the arts, performance, and creative practice. It's located within the heart of Hudson Yards, nestled amongst all of the density of the new towers that are built there, and conjoined with the infrastructure of the development as a whole. It shares resources with the 15 Hudson Yards Tower, which we also design, which is a residential building. Its primary attribute is that it's a massive structure that can deploy and capture the public space of the plaza to the east of it, and use that as sheltered, conditioned, programmed space for arts, performance, and culture. And when not needed, it can retract and nest over its fixed building with the galleries and performance spaces inside, seeding the public space to outdoor use once again. Uses reinvented industrial crane technology, and there it is on the southern 30th Street corridor, deployed, and from the north you see it deployed. The massive interior volume that it offers with its theatrical rigging and its ability to open or close to the outdoors. When it opened, it had enormous events like the Soundtrack of America inside the McCourt Hall. And these were vibrant performances filled with people. There was concerts by Bjork, multiple theatrical events, street dance by Flexen, and a lot of arts and music presentation within. This is Reich, Richter, and Part. It also was a place that would simply open up at times to the public, provide sheltered space for food and public space to hang out. And when COVID happened, there was an opportunity because of the nature and the flexibility of the Shed, the way that it could shelter public space and produce an almost outdoor condition inside with social distancing, but the infrastructure to support performance and cultural activities, that it proved to be successful as a venue that could continue to do programming during COVID. That was early on, the Philharmonic doing a performance. Later on, Thomas Saraceno, earlier this year, did the installation, Particular Matters, that was the large sphere with a spider web inside, and people at low density could go in and be suspended within the sphere on the spider web and experience the interaction with each other that they produced through vibration across the web. Drift was again a low density installation within the volume of the Shed. And later Fashion Week. Again, the volume of the space producing a sense of comfort, almost as though it were an outdoor space, a public space, but sheltered from the elements. And experimental performances like Kinetic Light from artists within New York City. So that's the shed deployed on the High Line. And together, again, I would say that the High Line and the shed produce two different conditions of resiliency within COVID. Programmed space in the shed that's curated and highly controlled, but engaging a broad public through culture, and the High Line, which is very open-ended, flexible, and generous in the way that it produces outdoor spaces that fostered and nurtured the regeneration of public and social life during COVID. The last project I'll speak about is the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum in Colorado Springs. This was a project that was started about 5 years before COVID happened, and it was dedicated in what's called Olympic City, America, to telling the stories of Olympic and Paralympic athletes in a museum, talking about their struggles as well as their triumphs and a lot of the history around the Olympics. This is the site in Colorado Springs on the northwestern edge of the city. You see its backdrop is the spectacular Rockies Mountains and Pikes Peak. Was actually intended as also a catalyst or a revitalization project that was intended to produce in an defunct industrial edge of the downtown a new sustainable high density growth for living and working. So quite a lot of development should happen around it, but it was to become the anchor project for that development. And in approaching the project, we imagined a two-part museum building that, instead of culminating at the end of the axis, it framed Pikes Peak beyond it and formed a plaza below that was a generous and welcoming space to visitors and locals alike. And so this is the Olympic Plaza and the museum building. Also opposing it is the smaller cafe and education building, which is a landform coming out of the site. The museum is a sort of pinwheel form. You see it on the edge of a rail yard to the northwest. And so the complex had to form a kind of bowl or a site for itself as a backdrop, receiving the public from the southeast in its plaza space. And there you see the way in which the circuitry of ramps and walkways across the site provide accessibility to all areas of the site through multiple very gradual paths that ascend and descend the landscape and pull the public directly from the plaza into the museum. So just again, the press of opening during is actually 2020, and then a reopening in 2021. The careful attention with the interactives within the museum around creating no-touch interactivities, using RFID devices and whatnot, so that experience was natural and did not require contact. And so the story of an anti-COVID tech when it opened. The design of the museum is such that, again, the public spaces sweep directly from the outdoor plaza into the lobby and connect from the bottom to the top. Typically, you would ascend a room-sized elevator from the central hall to the top of the first gallery, and then there's a continuous sloped and ramped path from the galleries in two cycles from the top to the bottom. So a universal path shared by everybody, people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds. Everybody takes the same route. And so in that way, it's intended to be completely a universally accessible building, and one that's very in keeping with the stories of the athletes, particularly the Olympic or the Paralympic athletes, that there's a kind of a universality to the way that architecture works. The building's organized around a central hall space where you arrive, which has daylight streaming in down the walls from the top to draw your eyes up, create a sense of aspiration. As you arrive at the top, the movement through the galleries is effectively a kind of a pinwheel from the center to the perimeter and then back, traversing down a level on ramps, and then again, and then again. And overhead, a clear story light produces a kind of natural or intuitive wayfinding vector. So as you follow the daylight seams of the building, they tell you where to go from one level to another through the gallery sequence. And this is just a typical plan at the top showing the storytelling approach. We didn't design the exhibitions within, but collaborated on their relation to the building. The journey to excellence, athlete training, the lab, the Parade of Nations experience, which is the beginning of the Olympics at the opening ceremonies, and on and on. And the spaces are black box spaces that are rich with content, objects, and interactive experiences to tell the stories of Olympic and Paralympic athletes. And in between, you can effectively peel behind the fabric of the atrium walls out on these small perches, take a pause from the experience of museum storytelling and overlook the space of the central hall. Again, reconnect with people who are arriving and sort of clear your head or take a momentary break and then return to the cycle of galleries. The architecture works sort of like an origami with the shell of the outside folding over and under itself to produce seams of light, as I mentioned. And the skin is a tessellated fabric of scales that resemble, in a sense, like a garment, like the shark skin swimsuit of Olympic athletes. It feels like a skin that's stretched over the bones or the structure of the building as it's twisting and turning to make these pinwheel movements as people move through the galleries within. And again, this shows the shaping of the scaled panels, 9,000 unique ones on the exterior of the building that produce a sense of movement, light, and shadow across the black box spaces of the galleries. And the form of the museum twists and arches over the plaza entrance to form a kind of a canopy almost that invites you to enter below. The cafe and restaurant have gentle seating risers that invite you to hang out and people watch in the plaza or simply have lunch. It's intended to be a very welcoming, friendly, and engaging space, again, for locals as well as for visitors. And you see the way that the forms of the building within the public space are twisting and turning, and they produce gradients of light and shadow as the very dramatic skies of Colorado Springs are constantly changing. These are some details of those seams where the light and view enter the museum, and the way that the twisting form and light makes this quite unusual building in this context feel very natural with the shapes of the mountains and the coloration of daylight that washes the Colorado Springs area. A second component of this project, and a very crucial one, was the addition of the Park Union Bridge, which connects the museum across those 12 active rail lines to a park across the way called the America the Beautiful Park. And this reinforces a larger network of cycle and pedestrian trails that connect to the mountains and through the city of Colorado Springs and ultimately along a greenway going to Denver. This was our design for the Park Union Bridge, kind of arch that was stretched all the way across the site. So you pass through one side and come out the other. And the elevation of that showing the interlocking of produced through the arch of the museum and the park. Models showing the design of that structure, which we think is nice because of the economy of its gesture, but it produces quite a dramatic experience as you pass through the portal. I'll skip that in the interest of time, but the bridge was fabricated or assembled on site of prefabricated components and then conveyed across in a single day over the rail yards and dropped in place so that it had minimum interference with the active rail lines. There it is illuminated at night. In a way, the bridge itself is a kind of a public space. It's a place to transition from one side to the other, but it's also a place to stop and to overlook the city or the rail lines. And it's an active place that supports the active life in the city of walking, cycling, and all forms of mobility. So this project is still going strong since it opened, and the urban catalyst or change that it was intended to bring about is beginning to happen. The planning of the new light rail connection to Denver, stopping here, the planning for high density residential and even some office and retail areas all around it. So it is intended to produce a kind of sustainable fabric within Colorado Springs that fights the general sprawl that's moving out into the countryside by concentrating people in the city core. As a project, we believe it's fairly successful through COVID in hosting outdoor events and functions in a way that promotes social life and a kind of a spirit of striving for excellence in whatever you do. So that's what I have to talk about today. I think that, again, I would call it a very personal attempt to speak about how the work of designing public and cultural spaces in cities, we believe to be a crucial role for designers and architects, that it's not the end all, but it's certainly an important ingredient in the making of sustainable and healthy cities. And I do believe that public spaces produce a kind of resilient condition within cities that helps to address the unforeseen when it comes our way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Natalia.
Ben, your work, like your office work, your team work, makes me happy. You know, I live in New York. I enjoy those public spaces you create. I am proud of being on them, to see that there is people who understand New Yorkers and who challenge New Yorkers to use the space and to be part of the space. So I think that goal that, you know, obviously have is completely seen and lived in New York. So I am very proud, first of all, to have you here because, you know, if we're talking about New York City, if we're talking about good work done in New York, you're a great representative. So thank you for that. The urban work that you have done with the Highline, for example, with Lincoln Center, that they are connect the city. I'm going to the ballet this weekend, and I'm happy to enjoy the space. And then, the Highland, that who doesn't enjoy it? It's not a commercial space. That's amazing. How many public spaces that are outdoors and plazas and things like that? We have Central Park, of course, but there was that lack of that type of space in New York, and using, an existing structure and put it into this very, useful use is amazing. The other thing, the shed, we wanted, as the New York City Architecture Biennial, to have an event, a physical event there. That was our goal. It's complicated. You need many of these sponsors that we have on the side to achieve that. But it's a place for artists. So with that, and because we are a nonprofit organization, we were hopeful to get there, and it's our goal. And sometimes, sometimes we may see you there.
Great.
Yes, and then like the work that you have done with the museums that are accessible, they are beautiful, artful on themselves, and like the accessibility that sometimes looks like ugly, you make it look fantastic. So and what accessibility means, like, is inclusive. So I don't know, I know that Rick is around, and he also next to me. I think he's going to say hello here.
I think it's much easier to do this with a virtual background with real faces that are close together. I just wanted to compliment you then on a great presentation. Seeing work that's familiar, particularly the Lincoln Center work, through your eyes and in hearing it through your words makes such an important difference. There was a lot of controversy about the changes to the Dan Kiley garden, as you alluded to, and as we all recall. But ultimately, what your firm has done, whether it's at the Highline or at MoMA or anywhere in between, is to make spaces that people enjoy being in, and that are functionally relevant to the issues of the day. There's a gesture toward the context of what was there before, but not a subservience to it. And at that point, it's not architecture as form. It's what Jan Gehl was talking about in terms of placemaking. It's what we were hearing from many of the speakers throughout these last 3 days. It's how architects change the world and make it better. And, you and your firm are at the top of the pile. So thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for saying that.
If I could add a word to that, I had said earlier on that it would be so interesting to see an intersection, not a debate, but a discussion between Jan Gehl, who we all know is a master of the public realm, and Alberto, who talked about new technology and the evolution of biologically generated objects. I have to say, one of the things that you guys have done is you've really managed to marry those things in the projects that were discussed, as Rick said. I mean, certainly with the shed, with the Highline, these are projects that have done away with the division between object and space and made holistic environment, which in many respects is a kind of a lodestone to how to go forward. So I don't know that you necessarily compliment yourselves on those achievements, but I do when referring people to your work. I say that's something to be understood and appreciated and learned from. So again, I'll add my thanks to the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we wrestle a lot with the unforeseen. the future, and how do you make spaces of real specificity and character, and obviously they have to be programmatically functional and everything, but so many things, and the last 2 years have definitely proven it more than anything, are completely unforeseen. What the spaces will endure and what they can offer to adapting and changing within the city, how we live and how we interact, and what's important to do collectively in our shared experience. So I think it's certainly every project we wrestle with that, and we're always trying to find the right balance.
Well, I guess I'm complimenting you because not everybody even wrestles with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Well,
Natalia.
yes, no, absolutely. I think we all are here on our feet to compliment you, and please send our regards to your partners too. We wish someday we will have one, in the next conference, we have another one. It all have different perspectives. So, maybe, we work things out. So we have more of your presence in our events. And well, as I said before, you're part of New York City. I feel the presence of your office all around when we walk around, and we're very, very proud. And thank you for everything. So with that, we have to move. Like, I invite you to stay. We have the IN Award, which is a fantastic event that awards the professionals and students. And well, maybe someday we all sponsor this event too. So, well, thank you. I'll let you go, and we're gonna share a little bit of the IN Award.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Bye bye.